are calling as Amnesty for applying immigration detention only in exceptional circumstances and always for the shortest periods.
During our recent lunchtime event in our London offices, experts discussed the migration crisis in the Mediterranean, the unrests in Libya, and linkages between the two. According to a recent report by the US Institute for Peace, traditionally, the main groupings of migrants in Libya were sub-Saharan Africans, fleeing from persecution, abuse and repressive regimes in search for better opportunities in the EU. However, in recent years there has been a huge rise of Syrians flowing through Libya.
Most of them simply amassed from wealth that they have, and many of the people fleeing Syria are certainly not poor. They were middle class, they were of all levels of society, and so you see a pretty broad spectrum in the kind of financial resources that the Syrian families and migrant groupings that are passing through the country can throw at the problem. That of course is significantly more generally than sub-Saharan African migrants, many of which have to stop at different points, transit points or smuggling hubs along the route in order to work for a period of time to further build up financing again. One thing that I think has been distressing to see has been often the targeting of those migrant workers in different points in Libya, having their money from their work stolen, having employers in Libya abuse them, remove their passports, or subject them to forced labour in order to work off a debt, at which point their passport will be returned and they will be allowed to make the journey onwards.
The experts agreed that the way migrants were currently being dealt with in Libya and in the migration detention centres was appalling.
There's huge overcrowding, there's a lack of washing and sanitation facilities or access to these facilities. The people usually sleep on very thin mattresses, in very unhygienic conditions where they're at risk of skin diseases such as scabies and as well as chest infections. There's medical care is lacking, and there's obviously huge, very widespread torture and other ill treatment. The situation is really catastrophic. These migrants and refugees never have access to a lawyer, never appear before a judge. They're just picked up from the street by either a militia or another group or the security forces, and then placed in such immigration detention centers and then transferred from center to center and held for months on end until they're able to either bribe their way out or in some cases are picked up from the centers and then forced to work for free for some of the guards.
I think one thing would be to think about addressing the migration issue further down the chain at an earlier point before they're simply reaching, and quite literally, the shores of Europe. Being able to potentially maybe push reception or processing centres outward into sub-Saharan Africa, into other parts of the world, in order to allow legal channels to develop so that migrants aren't desperately seeking the weak point through which they try to pass. One
way of reducing abuses in Libya at the moment against migrants and refugees is to really providing the safe legal routes for people that are transiting via the country, so that no refugee that is going, say, from Syria via Turkey, via Algeria or Sudan, that they would have to go through smugglers' routes and to be exposed to violations. It applies also to Eritreans, it applies also to Somalis, to other people that could be qualified to apply for asylum because of conflict or persecution.
They believe that putting pressure on oppressive governments is a way the EU could actively intervene.